Well, joining me now to discuss the top stories is Dr. Carrie Odermann. She is a global affairs analyst. Let's focus on Estonia's move to get NATO by using Article 4 after the airspace invasion by Russia. Good to have you this weekend, even though it's on short notice. Do you think this airspace violation is a deliberate act? And the airspace invasion by Russia says it lasted for 12 minutes.
I think, along with many other analysts, that this was clearly a deliberate act, and 12 minutes is a very long time. There's evidence that the transponders were off on these planes. There is plausible deniability from the Russian side, but this is now a very important moment of what NATO is going to do after this airspace violation. And Estonia, like Poland, has now invoked Article 4, which means that they'll be coming together to discuss what the next steps are.
Do you think it's enough to, provoke NATO? Was it even done to provoke NATO? And how should the West react to this, knowing who Putin is?
It was definitely done not only to provoke, but also to test the response. And you mentioned that it was 12 minutes of airspace. And if you look at in 2015, there was a Russian jet in Turkish airspace for 12 seconds, and it was shot down. That set the tone for Turkish-Russian relations for the next 15 years. And 12 minutes is an awfully long time. And not only did it provoke NATO, but Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin also learned a lot from this episode about how prepared NATO is, how quickly they can act, and what kind of deterrence is actually set up and ready to go.
So the thing about it is, Dr. Kari, a lot of people have, Putin's boldness has been linked to his confidence in allies like China, India, North Korea, and so on. So do you agree that some of these moves are because of the kind of allies and the people he has behind him?
Well, we need to look at how both India and China responded to this. And they responded to this infringement on Estonian airspace like they have done in the past, very muted responses. India is very reluctant and hasn't openly criticized the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and they keep calling for peaceful and democratic solutions. However, India is one of the countries that's actually benefited from the Russian invasion of Ukraine by buying discounted oil and then refining it and selling it to EU countries where Russian fuel is sanctioned. So India may be reserved, but they're actually benefiting from the conflict. If Putin feels more confident because he has China and India behind him, I don't know if that's it. I think he's more forced to act because the clock is ticking in terms of how much he has left to invest in his full-scale invasion as his finances are dwindling.
I'm very sure you know about, Trump's response, who he said right after what had happened when it got to him, he says he's going to be briefed in an hour. With the U.S. coming into this, the Britain, that's the West, EU as well. What can this possibly spiral into, especially, having at the back of our minds how NATO has approached this? And like you give us the instance from Turkey, what had happened with Turkey and Russia back then. One's wondering, what would this spiral into if NATO decides to do anything, and what can NATO do?
I think even using the word spiraling is the wrong way to approach this, because that means that something starts and is out of control. And this has been a very controlled, meticulously planned, a step-by-step process from NATO. There's no spiraling here. If there was spiraling, the reactions would have been much, much quicker. I'm looking more towards less of a NATO response and more of new responses and new alliances. Yes, I mentioned that Turkey did shoot down a Russian jet after just 12 seconds in its airspace on the Turkish-Syrian border. And Turkey, as a NATO member, did that absolutely unilaterally. It did report to NATO after the fact, and there was consultations on that. But Poland, Romania, and Estonia are all within their rights to unilaterally act. They haven't yet, but it should be interesting to see if the countries that have identical threat perceptions, especially on NATO's eastern flank, start acting unilaterally or in a new type of alliance that is NATO adjacent, but not necessarily NATO. And we're always talking about Article 4, which is the consultations, and Article 5. If Article 5 actually is invoked, and that is what I like to call the three musketeers, the all for one and one for all, when one nation is attacked, then they're all considered attacked. This is about the fine print. And this used to be the gold standard of protection. But if you look closely at the wording of Article 5, the members of the alliance can react to an Article 5 situation how they individually see fit. And that might be boots on the ground, that could be air support, but it could also be the equivalent of thoughts and prayers if they think that's appropriate.
I think that's the appropriate, question with regards how would happen, what would happen if Article 5 is, invoked. But how do you expect NATO to respond now since Estonia has activated, that Article 4, and then looking towards Article 5? And then you did mention about, alliances in times like this. What, alliances could, come out of, situations like this?
Well, there's an idea, a very old idea going back to World War I called the intermarium, which was basically from the Latin between the seas, from the Baltic to the Black Sea to the Adriatic Sea. And it is an idea that has different iterations, but the countries along this line, north to south, if you would include Turkey, and I would include Turkey in this, are all on NATO and also Europe's eastern flank. And with the exception of maybe Hungary, they all see the threat coming from the Kremlin and Russia. And I see cooperation between these countries who understand the threat and share the same threat perception much more likely. In this summer, 5 of the countries along NATO's eastern flank, all in July, withdrew from the Ottawa Treaty. The Ottawa Treaty is against the use of mines. And now that Ukraine, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, and I also believe Sweden, but I'm not sure about that, are now embracing the fact that they may have to mine their borders, shows that there are commonalities between countries, and this might be how the future looks.
Right. And finally, how should, Trump respond to these, violation by Putin? He seems more bent on, being on Putin's side or being his friend while, compromising alliances than, any other. But then how do you think Trump would react to this?
How he should react is he should make a strong statement condemning it and offer support. But President Trump is not predictable, so I don't know how he will react. I can make a suggestion, though, about something that might resonate with him. As a businessman, the only thing that he might understand is that we should start fining Russia for these airspace infringements. There is an awful lot of money, Russian money, in a bank in Brussels that could be used each time Russia breaks international law. It could easily be put a price tag on flight hours for fighter jets or the cost of jet fuel or maintenance. An F-35 costs about $42,000 an hour to run. It took 2 F-35s to escort those 3 MiGs. Just bill Russia for that and take the money out of that account. I could see President Trump liking that idea, and it's something that he would understand. And it's something that I'd encourage the Europeans also to look into. You don't always have to put boots on the ground. The solutions don't have to be kinetic, because wars may start on battlefields, but they're always going to end at the bank.
Right, and we have a lot of that in our hands to handle already. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Carrie Odermann. She is a global affairs expert.